Hi there, folks. This is WP-Tonic, episode 101. Yes, we've during the week we had our milestone, our 100th episode. We've had some technical problems, folks, but in the true spirit of WordPress, me and my great panel have overcome the hurdles, and we're recording this show on Google Hangout because Blab this morning imploded. But it should be a good show. We're going to talk. We've got some good topics, and then we're going to go on to our main topic, which is going to be around e-commerce, not solely about WooCommerce, but the general subject and a bit of WooCommerce. So first of all, I'm going to let my great panel introduce themselves. Sally, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Oh, I suppose I could be persuaded. My name is Sallie Goetsch, rhymes with sketch, and my business is WP Fangirl, and I am the organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup in Oakland, California, which is not to be confused with Oakley, California, which is where I live.
That could be confusing, but that's life, isn't it, Sally? True. All right, David, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is David Laietta, rhymes with pancetta.
I like that. That's the new one.
I don't know. I'm out of Orlando, so it's a little bit later in the day for me out here.
Yes, and you're going into the forests, aren't you, for the next few weeks, aren't you?
I'm going to be out in California for the next 2 weeks, but off the grid.
How are you going to cope, David? I couldn't cope with that.
I'm sure we'll have plenty.
Being in California or being off the grid?
Being off the grid.
It's going to be quite enjoyable, but I'm sure I'll be on the internet plenty still.
Oh, all right then. And I'd like John, my beloved co-host, like to introduce yourself.
Sure thing. My name is John Locke, and my business is Lockdown Design. There you go.
That was nice and simple, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So I posted everybody some stories that I found that I thought that we could start off. And the number one story was the release of Gravity Forms 2. Let's start off with Sally. What did you think of the upgrade? It looks pretty good.
It does look pretty good. They haven't actually, if you read the article, you'll see that it's available for new installs, but if you've already got Gravity Forms installed, they haven't rolled out the automatic update yet. So I have not experienced it in practice. It seems like it will be useful, and I will want to double check and make sure that it's not going to break anything at the time that I have to update it on a few dozen websites. But I use Gravity Forms all the time, and so it's always nice to see continuing work there.
Yeah. So what did you think, David?
Yeah, I haven't played with it yet. As Sally said, those of us who already have it installed on our sites are probably just going to wait for the update next week. But that is a really, really extensive set of release notes. I mean, of course, it's a large version, a 0.0 coming out, but there's just so much to go through. I'm most interested in the conditional logic changes, just because there have been a few times I've wanted to use some of the fields that weren't available for conditional logic in my forms, so I'm looking forward to that. And it looks like I'm going to have to learn a whole lot of new filters now.
Yeah, but it does look like the additional fields. That's going to be a real bonus, isn't it, Dave? You'll be able to do a lot more than even you could do.
Absolutely. So, like, for instance, I wanted to be able to verify whether certain selections were made in a multi-select field, and in the past you weren't able to do that, not out of the box, but now that's going to be apparently one of the new ones.
Yeah, and of course the capture, they've got the new one, that's the kind of main public one, but the conditional logic is
the conditionals are way more interesting to me. I think CAPTCHA is an instrument of the devil.
Well, I think the new version 2 is a bit better, but there we go. But I do agree with you. What about you,
No,
John?
anybody's CAPTCHA anywhere.
All right, there we go. Lord has spoken. Robert, what do you think, John?
No, I think, obviously this is like a major release. I haven't had a chance to test it before it gets released to the general public like next week, but it looks like the conditional logic is greatly improved. And also there's some enhancements with the responsive qualities with the forms, so that's going to be able to better support mobile devices, and I think that's going to make things like a lot easier because sometimes styling Gravity Forms is a little bit tricky. So it'll be interesting to see how that does. I'm going to have to test this out on a lot of sites. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's already pretty interesting and easy-ish to build like a whole business workflow just around Gravity Forms, and any enhancements make it even easier. That I can basically have that power almost all of the functionality of a site, all the logic.
I just tend to, because I've got the developer's license, so if I am working on anything, I just tend to use it. But David, have you used any? How do you think it compares with some of the other competitors in the market? Do you think this upgrade kind of puts it up in the top tier again, or have you been looking at some of the other solutions, or you just stay with this?
I stay with Gravity Forms. I haven't really considered switching to any other form solution, and at the cost, it's really worth it. I can see a basic site, that I can say just use the contact form feature that Jetpack has, or maybe even use contact form 7. But I haven't used contact form 7 in years, and every time I have to go mess with it, I hate it. And it works really well, and it's great that it's free. But there are too many people who are just going, oh, no, that one's free, and that one costs $40 to put on my site. So, I got to save $40 now and spend an extra 20 hours setting it up.
Yeah, exactly.
It is. I hear really good things about Caldera Forms, about Ninja Forms, about Captain Forms. I'd love us to have at our meetup like a form face-off. But the thing is that to test all of the additional features that go with those plugins, I'd have to shell out a heck of a lot of money. And Gravity Forms, their developer package is a much better deal than having to buy all of the extensions for something like Ninja Forms. I have used the free Ninja Forms when I wanted just a simple contact form, and it's great. But once you start needing people to be able to upload a file or whatever, it's just easier to put Gravity Forms on there.
Yeah, totally agree. So I think we covered that one, but it looks, I thought we'd need to talk about it because it's such a kind of big plugin, and a lot of the WordPress developer community use it, so I thought it's worth talking about. So on to the next news story that I thought was, it's a subject that we've touched before, but Brad from Delicious Brains wrote this blog post, and it was in the tavern, so I thought it was worth covering again. So let's start with Sallie again. What did you think of this post and this story?
This is one of those things where, in an ideal world, I agree with you. And in certain cases, how it tends to break down is if there's something where, you have a developer license, and that I use a lot, that I have a developer license for, I'm usually going to use my license. And with things like Gravity Forms, it will be a fairly astonishing occurrence if I don't renew that license. With things where there's only a one-off license available, I generally have the client buy the license. And I prefer to have them do it. But let me tell you, it is darn difficult not to get them to pay for the license, to get them to actually go in and buy the license and send the information so that they're the one that gets the bill, and so on. And even when, I have had an instance recently with the Events Calendar Pro where, I spent about 4 months reminding the client that she needed to upgrade this and double checking and saying, well, no, I don't have your, I don't have your credit card. I have her login. I don't have your credit card information. I mean, it's amazing how many people will give me their credit card information, but so I can't renew. You have to do this yourself. And we finally got it done. And I still had to go in and update the license key and so on. But, even when a client is willing, there are a lot of people for whom that's actually seems to be technically very, very difficult.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. What do you feel, David?
Yeah, the impetus should be on you as the maintainer of the project, to make sure everything comes together for your client. But there are certain times that they will need to shell out, and it's not a money thing. But I agree, it's a making sure they are the ones that are on the hook for years down the road. And I honestly don't see how difficult it would be to tell somebody. I say I don't see it, and yet I actually see it actually happen with clients, just to say, listen, you're already paying me money, cool, now you need to go pay these people money too. You know how to buy things on the internet, I trust that. But yeah, there seems to be that cognitive leap, and I do wish there were a better way to kind of pass billing along to the clients, but I have not seen any company do that well. WP Engine just started doing a staging service that looks promising. Basically, a way to stage client sites on WP Engine for free, and then when you're ready to pass it on to the client, you kind of send it over to them and go, great. If you want other people on the internet to see this, now you have to go pay WP Engine. It'd be really nice to see plugins be able to do that.
I'll give them full marks for originality. Sorry, but yeah, what do you feel, John?
Yeah, I just want to say, David, thumbs up at that idea with WP Engine. Having to where you can stage the site and then hand the bill to the client. Flywheel's been doing that for a little while, so it's good to see them pick up on that. So with the licenses with the clients, there's kind of 3 ways you can go. You can either, ideally, have the conversation at the beginning of the project, hey, here's how much you're going to need to budget, based on our discovery session, here's what you're going to need to budget for plugins. Each year, you're going to have to, spend this much on licenses. And that's ideally. And some clients are pretty good about that, and they maintain their own. And then the other ways you can go is you can have them piggyback off your developer licenses. Or you can just, buy the licenses, individual licenses, and then say in the contract, hey, after, this expires, you're responsible for upgrading. Ideally, you always have people in charge of their own licenses, because if you have them piggyback off your developer license, now it's on you to keep up that developer's license for any projects that are out there, and if you don't, then it's your fault. If the site breaks, and then if you just install by a single license and then don't have that conversation with them, hey, you need to update this each year, they won't, and eventually the site will either break or not be compatible or get hacked. So in a perfect world, we're always, having that conversation at the beginning, after we, kind of make a plan for what the site is, and say hey, part of this budget each year you have to put toward maintaining your plugins, and you own the licenses. I think that's the best way to go. So.
Yeah, I think that was greatly put. I'm just going to put my 10 penneths in. I understand where Brian was coming from this post. And there's no right and wrong. I don't really agree with his position on this. I think it's much more complicated myself. How I do, obviously I've got a maintenance company, but I've got quite a few legacy clients, and if it's a plugin that I'm going to use a lot, on clients' websites, they normally come in with my developer's license, but they're made totally aware that for that license to be maintained, they've got to have an ongoing maintenance contract with WP-Tonic. These are legacy clients when I was running an agency in Reno, and they've come in and they always were on some form of maintenance plan. I think I'm doing a job for a client now, and they wanted MemberPress and they wanted all the functionality, so they bought the developer's license, because I don't plan to use MemberPress that regularly. So it was best that the client bought the license, and that's what they've done. I think when it comes to themes, I definitely think the client should buy the theme.
And themes don't really bother me as much, because the themes get updated much less often than plugins do. I think it's a perception and expectation problem. I know Syed Balki posted a similar post to, I think it was to Opt-in Monster, maybe it was the automotive site, I don't know, one of his sites a few months ago, about Opt-in Monster, saying that clients should be purchasing their own license for the plugins they're going to use. He came about it from a financial sense, saying that it makes more sense for you to have your clients pay for it, and it of course makes more sense for them to have only one person using an unlimited license than an unlimited number of people. But there's that client expectation of client works with me. They are using my Gravity Forms developer license, which is fine because I can use it on unlimited sites, so it's not really bothering anybody. And then they don't work with me anymore for whatever number of reasons, and they come back a year or two later, and something's going on with their site. They need to contact Gravity Forms support, and they are unable to because they don't have the login to do so. Most of these you're paying for, most big plugins you're paying for support. And their expectation is, well, I'm already using this on my site. I already paid for my site. I deserve access to this. Or the perception of the ability to reuse that wherever they want. So, say, for example, most of these, when you place your license key into the site, into an option on the site, your license key is visible on the site. So they have that ability to go and use that on whatever other sites they want if they realize that that's the case. You'll end up being on the hook potentially for more work that than you've been paid for.
Yeah, I think it's also how the license. Most of the plugins that I have bought have got a more sophisticated. You can deactivate them even if you don't have access to the thing, to the back end of the website anymore. But I think it's just if you speak to the client, you're upfront about it, you explain it, and also it's in the contract, and it's in black and white, and it's clearly understandable, and everybody agreed to the situation. I think it's a very grey area. But I do agree with Brad. If in the totality of it, it would be better, and that's what I do push. If it's obvious that I'm not going to have a long-term commitment with that client, and they, if I can, it's better that they buy everything and it's all in their name. But it doesn't always pan out, so I think it's a much more grey area. So I think we've covered that, because it can just go into a loop, can't it? Because it's one of these real grey things. So on to the next story that I thought was reasonably interesting, was the Google fonts. They've upgraded their interface and how the system works. I thought that was pretty interesting. Would you like to start off with that, actually, John? Because you also said it kind of triggered something that you said last week about how Google fonts have really kind of influenced web design in general. So would you like to start off with that, John?
Yeah, sure thing. So Google Fonts, a lot of people, already use this as it's basically like a free font repository. there's certain fonts in here that a lot of people use in their web design, and basically their user interface changed to where you can preview the fonts like much more easily and see like the different types. You can see them like used in different various font weights and font sizes and so a lot of people, and I think probably that they were influenced a little bit by like other services like this, like Typekit, that allow you like more of a preview of the font. But a lot of people are like, yeah, this is cool. I can see the fonts that I'm selecting like a little bit more easily, like stacked side by side. So yeah.
Before I ask the other two, Sallie and David, for their comments, I was thinking what you said last week about this, and do you think some Google, because they're free, and because we were doing that review of that site, and you mentioned that it had a lot of different fonts, and you said they're probably trying to match up with this Google free font. Do you think in some ways it's also had a detrimental effect, their influence on fonts, or do you think it's been beneficial?
I wouldn't say it's really detrimental. I mean, it's like one of those like open source things that people just kind of take for granted, kind of like Font Awesome. It's just one of those things that people expect to use, and they're like, hey, here's some cool fonts. If I can't afford to buy like a premium font, from either like Typekit or fonts.com or something like that, then I can just go in Google Fonts and find something that matches like kind of close. But I will tell you that like, premium design, like sites that are like really for like a high level project are usually going to use some sort of like premium font. It's not totally necessary, but a lot of designers will just kind of gravitate toward using like premium fonts. And Google Fonts is just so you can find fonts that'll work, but it's fine. It's one more way to get a project done. But fonts is just one more cost that has to be considered. There's definitely like a lot of sites that won't be built with Google Fonts alone. So
go on, Sallie, what did you think of it?
Well, I think that the site where we were really seeing too many fonts, she had them all in images, so I'm not even sure whether they were Google Fonts. I mean, the tendency to use too many fonts is a sort of newbie designer mistake, and has been since there actually started to be fonts on computers. It dates back to the early days of desktop publishing. So I don't know that Google Fonts is really responsible for contributing to that. I think if people are loading a ton of Google Fonts on their sites, there may be some performance issues. There may be, that tends to add up. But that's a different sort of problem. And I'm trying to decide whether I like the new layout. It's sort of like, well, it's pretty, but at the same time, it's kind of harder to compare the fonts in detail if they're not all showing the same specimen text.
True. So, David, what did you think?
Well, particularly about, I think the new layout looks nice. I wish there was a bit easier to pair them. That's the one feature I would like them to have improved. But specifically on the question of how is Google Fonts affecting the font world, you have that expectation of free now. We can get something really great for free. You have the misperception that all fonts should be free. So there's the client who's like, no, we need to use Gotham on this, and it's a font, so just do the code and make the Gotham appear. That'll work, right? And then something that we don't really consider too often is how much we are giving to Google in exchange for licensing fonts from them for free. By using Google Fonts and by using them from their content delivery network, they're absolutely able to keep refining all of their profiles about us, gathering data from the sites that are using those fonts. Whether you consider that a good or a bad thing, I'm just saying that we are not getting these at zero cost.
Yeah, I think there were great points, David, and there were some of the issues that I was more thinking about actually, and I don't want to go into, because we could spend a whole show talking about maybe Google has too much influence on books, fonts, and also images and the whole thing. But I think there were great points, David. So I think we go on to I think we've had some good stories there. I think they were did my best. So I think we go on to the main subject, folks. But before that, we go for our break, and we'll be back in a few seconds.
Want to turn your WordPress website into an online speed machine? Go on over to WP-Tonic. They'll set up DigitalOcean websites hosting on solid-state drives. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for WP-Tonic's maintenance packages. WP-Tonic offers some of the very best WordPress maintenance packages on the market. So those who are serious about getting the very best platform for their WordPress sites, make sure you go on over to WP-Tonic.com.
We're coming back from our break. You probably heard some advertisement from WP-Tonic. So we're going to go on to the main subject, is e-commerce and the things that you should know about. Obviously it's a WordPress-focused podcast, but I just want to cover broadly some of the things that somebody thinking of starting their journey in e-commerce should really understand, that would help them make some right decisions, and maybe talk a little bit about WooCommerce. Obviously, we've got about half hour, so it'll quickly go. But I'd like to start off with Sallie. I haven't done I did a lot of work with Shopify and a bit of work with WooCommerce about 18 months ago. But I know some of the panel are very actively involved and some not. But to start off with, Sallie, what would you start off with, maybe two things that you think somebody starting on this journey should really understand?
Well, let's see. I think one thing that anybody who's thinking about starting an e-commerce site should understand is that if you are planning to make money from a website, which presumably you are if you're selling stuff, you have to expect to spend money on it. And that's going to be true whether you're using, a WordPress plugin, whether you're using something like Shopify, whether you're using something like, CafePress. It tends to take money to make money, and there will be costs involved whether you host it yourself or whether you use a hosted service. And the other thing, I think, is understanding the trade-offs between the relatively speedy setup and having stuff taken care of you that goes with using a hosted service, and the ability to customize and control things that goes with hosting it yourself and using maybe a WordPress plugin, maybe something like Magento, but something that you actually control and install on your own site.
Yeah, I get that. David, I know, I'm just going to ask you this broad question. I don't know if you've got any insight or you would want me to pass it on to John. When do you I said Shopify, but there's a number of popular kind of, I'm trying to find the right word to explain it, fully hosted, fully managed internal enclosed systems like Shopify. There's a number of them. And then you've got the kind of plug-in solution with WordPress, and WooCommerce is the most popular. Would you like to pass any comment about it, when somebody might want to look at the WordPress instead of one of these fully hosted solutions?
Yeah, when you're using a hosted solution, and I'm going to use an extremely relevant example, I think, because this happened to me 5 minutes before we started the show today. trying to purchase some items from a Shopify site this afternoon, and I run Privacy Badger on my browser, and it blocked a couple of ad networks, and the checkout features do not work simply because some ads are blocked on the page. So I'm not viewing an ad on this website, and I also can't purchase the thing that makes them like 100 times as much money as that one ad impression. But purchasing a gift, so I decide, okay, I'm going to copy this URL, go into an incognito tab where I have literally no extensions running. The page still loads poorly, and the checkout page doesn't, or after the checkout page loads, after me refreshing it a few times, the order process page never actually loads. And then I get like this blob of text that I can tell is your order is complete, but it's unformatted, everything, didn't get an email, so I ended up printing it just to make sure that I had it. But my point of me having a poor experience trying to buy something on a Shopify site today, and I've built plenty of Shopify sites for, is that you are dependent upon some of the decisions that they make. They have their Shopify-wide ad network that they decided, you know what, we're not going to allow your store to actually work unless your unless your visitor has that activated. And how many people do you think generally might have something blocked or might just not have JavaScript enabled, who will realize that, non-developers realize, oh, I know, it's because I'm actively blocking something. That same problem could happen in a WordPress site, but on my own site, I have a bit more control, or when I'm building it for a client, I have a bit more control in what I'm doing than saying I'm abiding by all the rules that this third party over here has imposed.
Yeah, I think that was a great insight, Dave. You're on the roll on this episode, David.
I'm angry at.
Yeah, but I think that was a great example, and it kind of showed the benefits of using a host internal, kind of semi-enclosed system like Shopify, and the benefits of using something open source. Would you, before I go on to John, David, of these fully hosted enclosed system, do you think, even though you've been frustrated this morning, do you think Shopify is one of the better ones? I know, but you just kind of said you got a bit frustrated with this particular website, or do you think there's better kind of fully hosted solutions, or do you think the point you were making kind of covers them all, really?
Well, of the hosted ones that I've used, Shopify has been my favorite. It has a good trade-off of extreme features that I'm going to BigCommerce, OS Commerce, whichever one of them is the managed one. The extremely in-depth amount of features you can get with those. It's a good trade-off between those features and ease of use. There are some other ones like Hello Merch works pretty well, but that one's a little bit less customizable. Shopify is kind of developer friendly to customize, but none of them, in my opinion, are really, really great. And a good example of one reason you might want to choose to host on your own, almost everything on Shopify is a plugin, which we from the WordPress world are familiar with plugins. In the WordPress world, we're also familiar with the fact that someone says, hey, here is a contact form plugin, or here is a more to the point, here is a UPS plugin for eCommerce, for WooCommerce. It's $40, whatever that is. I pay my $40, I've got it. With Shopify, it's, hey, here's your UPS add-on. It is $5 every single month.
Yeah.
And that's just for one feature. Now you want your other feature, now you want your currency conversion or whatever. That's another $4 every single month.
It soon mounts up, doesn't it? When I was knocking a few out for clients, it soon mounted up, and some of the plugins didn't work that well.
Yeah, you can test them beforehand, and some are outrageous. For a client who wanted a featured image slider, they have a product that has like 10 images associated with it, so they want it to have a little carousel of those images, and I ended up writing something custom just because I couldn't see to tell them, hey, listen, you can use this. It costs you $7 per month. It allows you to use this on up to 5 products. I just could not see trying to sell that to my client.
No, that wasn't a good deal. What? So, John, you do a fair bit with WooCommerce. When do Do you have that conversation if they approach you, or I don't know if you will work with Shopify or anything like that, or you just purely stay with a WordPress solution? Do you have that conversation, or most of the people you've kind of used a WordPress solution?
Most of the people that I've worked with have, self-hosted with WordPress, but sometimes, the budget isn't right to do like a self-hosted solution, like a WordPress or a Zencart or something like that, and that's when you would want to look at something like a BigCommerce or a Shopify or a Squarespace. Those type of solutions where you're just paying like a monthly fee are good if you want to just prove that there's a market for your product and you don't have a lot of budget. That's really when I would recommend things like that. Because as Sallie mentioned earlier, any type of self-hosted e-commerce solution, whether it's WooCommerce, whether it's Magento, whether it's Zencart, you're going to have to pay for hosting on a decent setup. More than likely, you're going to want like an SSL certificate, and you're going to want to keep a developer close at hand because all these e-commerce solutions require a continual development. You have more flexibility to customize things exactly the way that you want with a self-hosted solution, but again, you're going to have to pay for any yearly plugin licenses, your SSL certificate, and like any ongoing development. WooCommerce is very extensible, but it changes like every so often, and so you need someone to help you keep it up, or eventually things are going to go haywire. So an e-commerce site is more of an undertaking, like a continual undertaking than a simple, straightforward marketing site. And so if you're wanting to sell products online, expect to have like a larger yearly investment in that site.
Yeah, I think all the panels so far have made fantastic points, because I think it's a bit like the news story about who should own plugins, WordPress plugins. This is really a very grey area, and some people say, oh, you should go with Shopify or one of the other hosted solutions, or you get another group of people say you should definitely go with WooCommerce and that. But I really think
you've got a good surprise guest who just joined that you can probably ask this question to.
Oh, well, who's that then?
I see he's added on, but he's muted. Chris Christoph.
Yeah.
Granted, I don't know if Chris has his camera up or anything.
So, like I say, I think you made some fantastic points, because I just think it's a really grey area, and you really got to do some pre-planning. Sallie, when I did a few of these, there was two particular areas that always seemed to come up. One was how shipping was going to be dealt with, and linked with sales tax as well, shipping and sales tax. And the other one was accountancy software integration, especially QuickBooks. So can you give me some insights about that?
Those are all genuine issues. I worked on a WooCommerce site a while ago where they were using a QuickBooks integration solution that needed an API key hooked up, and it didn't work with Cloudflare, which was definitely a problem because the site had been getting a lot of unwanted bot traffic.
Chris, are you on a plane right now or something?
Are you with us, Chris?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we can hear you, Chris. Thanks for joining us. Have you been able to hear most of the conversation?
Yeah, I've been able to hear it. I've not been able to respond to it.
All right. So, would you like to jump in and give some responses to some of the things we've been saying?
Yeah. So I would honestly never recommend Shopify. There's a couple scenarios where it makes a lot of sense if you have really small time frame and you just need something up very quickly for a very short time, it makes a lot of sense. But if you're planning to use it as part of an ongoing business operation that you aren't going to be using at one time, there's definitely a lot to be said for both owning the data and being able to directly control it. Because the second you want to do anything that Shopify doesn't allow for, you're going to wish that you were on another platform.
Yeah, just to help the that was an interesting sound, Chris.
That's his pet tiger. Don't worry.
Just for our viewers, Chris, can you introduce yourself? Or was he gone?
Yeah, I'm actually on the bus right now, so heading back. So so I'm Chris Christoph. I helped make this little thing called JigaShop way back in the day. It became the thing called WooCommerce. Apparently that's a thing now. And then I worked with Pippin Williamson, and we've made this little e-commerce platform called Easy Digital Downloads.
Oh, right.
And then I also work at Automotive, and I am the lead developer on what was Google Analytics for Yoast, but now Monster Insights.
Well, thanks for joining us. Yeah, I think you made some really great points, Chris. Like I was saying, the rest of the panel also made some fantastic points. It's just I see kind of Shopify as just to try out to see if there's a market and try not to invest an enormous amount with Shopify. Just
right. Can you export your products and stuff from Shopify, or are you just starting over totally from the beginning if you switch?
Sorry.
You can.
You can. It's I haven't actually done it for a while. It wasn't as easy as they made out. It depended on the circumstance. But like I was saying, Sallie, I just think as a way of trying something out. But then I would recommend, if you're going to start investing a lot of money, that you would be better off on a system where you've got a lot more control. So, Dave, let's go with John. What would you?
Sorry, I just want to point out that for people who want to do it on the cheap or who just want to get something going, it's also more attractive of an option because WordPress.com has Shopify integration. And now you can actually get something similar for your self-hosted WordPress, but you can run your Shopify store right out of your WordPress.com account.
Oh, I didn't know that. How long have they been doing that?
That I don't know. I just know that you can. But I do know that Shopify about 2 months ago released a plugin for WordPress.org to do similar.
Right. So, John, what would you, the things I asked Sallie about shipping, sales tax, and the one that really, and it never really worked that well with Shopify, was the dreaded, halfway through the project, they say we need QuickBooks integration. That always was never mentioned at the beginning. But then I learnt my mistake, and that I asked that from day one. What's your insights about what I've just said, John?
So as far as that, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head about QuickBooks integration, but I can tell you that as far as like shipping. Shipping methods, there's, numerous extensions for WooCommerce that will, grab the UPS API or the USPS and give you like a live, shipping rates. So that's definitely like one way you can go. I know that WooCommerce is making some changes to their shipping zones like right now, and eventually like their current system for like shipping tables is going to change to make it like more user friendly. But yeah, there's definitely like numerous extensions that you can use. Like whatever your shipping method is, you can set it up to with the proper extensions, you can, use like any, provider that you need to and set like flat rates, priority, whatever, say like, to cover your own costs for that.
Yeah. And the other thing I'd like to point out, people, pre-planning is really important in any kind of web project. But when you start getting into e-commerce, unless it's a very, and I keep hearing this, and I use it myself, easy e-commerce, but I've never come across one, even when it's just anything more than a couple of products. It always, as it starts to build out, it always starts to get a little bit more. There's always something, some customization or something. Would you agree with that, Chris? And that's why you really recommend something like WooCommerce, because you find that there's always some customization that comes up.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, every little business has their little quirk for how they want to do pricing and stuff. So, I mean, Shopify can't fit a lot of the baskets that a typical e-commerce company might have.
Yeah, and compared to some of the, I know there's a couple other kind of open source PHP. Well, there's a number of them, isn't there? But I'm trying to remember a couple that are the most popular. But I think of that pack, I think WooCommerce is still the most flexible, most supported, and has the biggest documentation support community of them all. Would you agree with that, Chris?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing I like to ask Sallie about is another thing when I was dealing with this, Sallie, more actively, was the question of photography and the question of product photography. I think you can buy lighting boxes. There's ways of doing it yourself, but that you do need quality photography, and that even if you decide you're going to do it yourself or attempt to do it yourself, it's going to need some investment. How do you deal with that issue, Sallie?
So far, the clients have generally arranged that themselves, because they and their products are in one place and I am in another place, and I'm not somebody who does product photography. No. So it's been more a matter of, once we've decided what dimensions our images are going to be, what image ratio, are we using square images or vertical images or horizontal images or combinations thereof, so that the photographer knows to get things, and should they be with a background or without a background, and that is a big issue for sites, and it is something you certainly want to talk to a client about, if they're still in the planning stages of this, so that they understand this is a thing that they need to invest in.
Yeah, I'm bringing it up because, if you find a local photographer that's got a studio and you're hiring them for a day and you're taking all the products, and let's say I was doing one project, was a high-end chain of boutiques, and we were doing it in Shopify, and they just were shocked because they got extensive photography from the wholesalers, but they had a lot of unique product from small suppliers, and they had to do the photography. And to get a local photographer that had product photography experience, taking all the products, it was a 1 to 2 day affair, and it can easily get into the thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and they were just shocked. So what I was going to ask David, I'm going to ask you a slightly difficult question, but excluding the photography, copywriting, and all the other important external things, but the actual development, can you give any insights about cost? About, let's say you're dealing with e-commerce, a WooCommerce solution, and what kind of budget should people be thinking about that they're going to be quoted on? You got any insights about that, John, or is it just a too broad a question?
Wait, John or David?
Sorry? I was asking you.
I was asking you, David.
Oh, okay. Okay, never mind. I would say, first of all, whatever number it is that they have in their head, it's higher than that. but that's a small start. I would imagine that they could say, think of what we would charge just for a general brochure site, and for us, I would say double that, because you're talking about a few more things that need to be considered. Most people don't really think about the checkout experience and the workflow around that, and WordPress plugins have done a great job of making that easy, but they have not taken away the idea that you're going to need to design all those individual pages out. And I'm talking about receipts, account pages, checkout pages, the shopping cart page, groups of items if you're not just viewing an individual item, and so on, all those other different page views things you see. And then whatever features that somebody wants to launch with, they are going to forget that they needed that QuickBooks integration until halfway through the project and go, great, we can do that, but it's going to add some more money. Now, for most of the clients that I assume that we're working with, saying, here, you have to buy this, $50, even $100 plugin isn't going to be a big deal because they're probably, hopefully, paying us quite a bit more to actually do all the other work. But it can easily spiral out into people feeling like they're getting nickeled and dimed.
Yeah, it can. What about, got any insights, Chris, about this? About what are realistic budgets, really, based on your experience?
So I can't really speak to how agencies charge their customers for like the theme and the website building experience. I can only speak to the cost of extensions and stuff that people buy directly from us. But I would probably add on top of David's comments, which is for each extension that you buy and use on a site, I would also set aside on a per extension basis money to cover when those things break, because the second that your shipping plugin decides to break and you have to call David back and be like, hey, David, my pricing table for my camel isn't working anymore. I need it fixed. That's also getting more money. So that's definitely one. Another thing is a lot of the companies that do e-commerce sites, hopefully more and more, also encourage their clients to get retainer contracts for ongoing support issues. Those range on an agency to agency basis.
Yeah, that's great insights, because I think what Chris is trying to point out, folks, is that there's going to be a substantial more ongoing support maintenance costs than even at your average what is called a brochure site or some other online functionality, because there's a lot going on. John, you've got a lot of experience with WooCommerce and building them. Got any insights about what, for a kind of small, medium-sized company, what are realistic budgets when it comes to building something in WooCommerce based on your experience? Got any insights, John?
Yeah, I'm with David and Chris. Is whatever you budget for a normal, just straight up marketing site, an e-commerce site is going to have a lot more moving parts, and it's even for something like WooCommerce, which we perceive to be pretty simple.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Is it's got to be at least double what a normal site is, because there are more moving parts. You got to have better hosting. You have to set up and configure all these extensions. You've got to do testing, and absolutely having a retainer contract is a good idea, because I can tell you here's the thing. It's, say you've got different payment gateways. You've got PayPal, you've got your authorized or something like that, and it's heavily reliant on all these things working together in conjunction perfectly. Like WooCommerce itself, the extension, the payment gateway, all these things have to work perfectly. And if one little step in that is not working correctly, then the checkout isn't going to happen correctly. And these things get updated all the time. Payment gateways change, extensions change, the base plugins change. Your hosting may change, or it may need to be upgraded continually. There's a lot of hosts that don't upgrade their version of PHP on a consistent basis. So for all these reasons, it is good to have your agency on a retainer, because if you have an e-commerce site, it is way more complicated than a simple brochure site. Because, again, any of these moving parts get out of alignment, and things aren't going to be correct on your site. So, yeah, definitely I would say at least double. And again, if it's a more complicated thing, if you have more things and features that you're adding in there, or if you've got a gazillion products that you want to add, I would say even more than that. So.
And you also have all these tangential costs that aren't just the hosting or the payment gateways or other things. Mm-hmm. So I have my brochure website that's hey, come visit us and buy stuff in our in-store in-person store, and that's fine. And the server goes down, or the site gets hacked, or something. And okay, that's bad, but it's not really bad. I didn't choose a backup service or a security service or something, fine. But now I'm doing that on my e-commerce site. I have no backups on that site, and that's everything. That is a ledger of all of the actions undertaken on that site. And then for whatever reason, you lose all that data, and then you need to go, get a receipt for a customer, or somebody wants to make a refund, or whatever it is that you no longer have that ledger available. You have those tangential costs that are basically should be required for an e-commerce site. Extra security protection, a real-time backup system. I don't know, those are off the top of my head. Those things that I can do without on a brochure website, but are pretty much integral on this site.
Yeah, it certainly is. Sallie, I'd like to finish off with another really important area, which is, security and, was it PSI?
PCI compliance.
Compliance.
PCI.
Yeah, sorry. Can you give some insight about that particular subject? And it's a can of worms, but you really got, I think that's one of the factors why people get attracted to fully hosted, because they say we will handle that. Can you give any insights about it?
A lot of the PCI stuff is actually done by your merchant service, your payment processor, but you do have to, if you're not sending people off, if you use regular PayPal, you send people over to PayPal, it's entirely PayPal's problem to maintain the certificate, although I hear PayPal is going to start requiring SSL certificates, basically whether or not your people are going from your site to PayPal. You yourself should not be storing anybody's card information. Just don't. It sets you up for unbelievable levels of liability, and so whether it's PayPal or Stripe or Authorize.net or whoever, they should be the ones who store that. But you are still going to need the SSL certificate on your site in order to for transactions, you are probably going to need a paid for SSL certificate versus a free Let's Encrypt SSL certificate, and there are some issues with getting those kinds of things set up and making sure you've dealt with any mixed content and so on and so forth. I mean, generally, your host will set up the certificate for you, but there may be some issues to balance back and forth, and some things to make sure if you're using something like Cloudflare that your SSL is working with Cloudflare, and then undo all of it because the QuickBooks integration doesn't work through Cloudflare, which I had to do on one site. So again, it's just extra levels of complexity that you need to be aware of. And a lot of clients, if they're just starting out, if they're thinking, oh, I could sell some stuff online, they may just not be prepared for any of that, and it is possible that by the time you explain what's involved and the kinds of costs that are going to come in and so on, they're going to decide that it's not worth it to them because they just don't expect to make enough money.
Yeah. That's great. I think that's a great thing. And the other thing, John, I'm not sure I'm totally right about this, but even if you're, the merchant providers, that isn't there still some legal responsibility of the actual owner of the business around their own computer security and the actual security of the part of the site that is not taking credit cards? You still have some legal requirements, don't you?
To my knowledge, like PCI compliance is basically you're not storing like any sensitive data. You're not storing, like credit card information, anything that could be stolen like that. I would say that it's a good idea to make sure that your site's secure anyway, and to make sure that you're using like a SSL certificate on an e-commerce site to make sure that anything that could be accessed is going to be encrypted. I would say that that's just like a good idea. But yeah, I mean that's the whole reason why you would be using like a PayPal or like a third-party payment processor, is because they're handling like that compliance, and you are not storing like credit card information directly in your database. Yeah,
that's great. Chris, have you got any kind of insights about this, or anything extra you want to add to it about the security?
It was mentioned earlier that people would start requiring SSLs. That was originally the case. They actually pushed it back to June, and then decided later that they were going to not require that after all. But I mean, I would still recommend an SSL certificate anyway. Particularly if you're running on-site, you should have one anyway. But there's a new proposed PCI DSS compliance rule that they are looking at that would require, even if you use an off-site gateway like PayPal Standard, to have an SSL certificate anyway.
Yeah, I think that's I see exactly where you're coming across, Chris, because they have gone down in price a lot, haven't they? And it just makes the whole thing a lot more secure in general, doesn't it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oops, he's on his bus, folks. To finish off, Dave, you got anything to add to it about security? Anything that people got to keep in mind, or anything that we haven't covered to finish off, Dave, that you think people should be aware of?
You do have a bit bigger responsibility for keeping things secure, not just credit card numbers and information which you might not even have on your site, but you do have a legal responsibility to your customers for all of their other personal information, like their addresses, for instance. You can be held liable if someone's physical location gets out due to a leak from your website. PCI, the actual PCI compliance laws, statutes, whatever it is, there's a list of things that you need to do that need to be checked off to be PCI compliant, and they can get really technical, really arcane for the average user really quickly, which is what makes just offloading it all to a third-party service very attractive.
Yeah, the reason I bring this up, it was over 3 years ago. I had a client, and I won't go into it because they're still in business, and they insisted for various reasons, it was the particular industry they were involved in, that they actually had to handle this themselves, and I just said it was going to be a total nightmare, and it did turn out to be a total nightmare. So you really do have to understand that. So I think we've had a great conversation about this, folks, and we covered some things that if you're looking at doing e-commerce, you've got to understand around budget, about shipping, about sales tax, and about the difference between having a fully hosted solution and some of the problems, and around WordPress. So I'll start off with our panel. Sallie, how can people get hold of you if they want to learn more about you and the services you can offer?
Sure, just go to WPFangirl.com, and you should find all my contact information there, and I am at Sallie Goetsch on Twitter and various other places.
To our great guest, Chris, who joined us, really thanks for doing that, and for Dave for twittering you. How can people get hold of you, Chris?
Probably on Twitter, at ChrisUCT7.
Oh, thanks so much, Chris, for joining us. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. David, how can people get hold of you and learn more about the services and what you can offer, David?
Twitter would be best as well, at David Laietta. If you can go there and not be scared away, then I might be interested in working with you.
I don't know why they would be scared of you, Dave. You're a very nice guy. John, how can people get hold of you and learn more about how you can help them?
Sure. I just want to say, David, not scared at all. You're not a scared person.
Well, good.
Anyway, people can get a hold of me. You can find me at my website, which is lockdowndesign.com, and you can follow me on Twitter, lockdown_. Now tell the fine people how they can get a hold of you, Jonathan.
They can get me by going to the WP-Tonic website. We've got loads of content, interviews from almost everybody in the WordPress community, over 50 articles on all sorts of subjects, and they can either email me at jonathan@w-tonic.com or get me on Twitter, and that's at Jonathan Denwood, or just do a search. I'm all over the internet, maybe a bit too much, but who cares. So my panel, I'm going to finish the recording, come back and listen to the next show. Hopefully we're going to be on Blab next week if it doesn't implode, because we like chatting with people, and it's great for that on Blab. But I think we've recovered from the situation, and we had a great show, and I like to thank my panel. They've given some great value during this show. So we'll see you next week. Go to iTunes, subscribe, folks. That really helps, and we'll see you next time.